Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam White. It is time again for a government and legislative affairs update. And as we wait for a few people to join, it's nice to see people already checking in on Instagram and on Facebook. First, let me apologize for last month in October having some technical difficulties and not able to stream over Instagram. We're still working out some of the kinks. As you can tell, I am still here in the hangar, still wearing Hawaiian shirts, trying to find a new and different one every time. We do these just to kind of break up the monotony and to bring a little levity to the whole COVID pandemic and travel restrictions and other things. So still working on ways to get the content to be streamed over both platforms simultaneously. Right now, I've got an iPad, I've got my cell phone, I have my laptop, all sitting right here together. Actually got a shop light shining at me like the noonday sun here in the hangar to be able to get these things out to you. So looks like we got quite a crowd here. Got about 25 or so on Instagram and a little over 20 on Facebook. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Tonight at 7 o'clock, if you are in the Fairbanks area or are interested in operations in the Fairbanks area, the Fairbanks General Aviation Association is having their fall meeting via Zoom. And so I'm definitely going to be done before that time because I'm participating in that meeting tonight as well. But a lot of good information happening there in that forum. So if you're interested in that, fire me an email. Adam.white@alaskaairmen.org, and then maybe we can get that to you, that login information to you before 7 o'clock tonight after I get done here this evening. I'm going to talk about several items that I've got a long list of things that I keep a running tally of the things that we're tracking for you as members. Let me just put in a little bit of a plug that we do appreciate those of you who have renewed your membership here in the past 30 days. We really appreciate that. There's a new website being launched, a redesign of our website, I should say, on the 16th of this month is when that's scheduled. And with that, we're going to launch, excuse me, we're going to launch a new way that we interface and manage our membership database. And so there may be a few glitches that happen around the 16th or so of this month. I would ask that you be patient with us and give us an opportunity to work out those glitches. Let us know if you're running into problems with renewing your membership after the 16th or so, then we'll be able to track those down. Also want to remind you that raffle tickets are on sale. Call the office there in Anchorage and be able to purchase those tickets there. Besides the chance of being able to win an incredible airplane, if you haven't seen some of the build footage, the camera angles that they're doing, some of the really cool stuff that Rob Stapleton and his crew are doing, the social media side of that, as Acme Cubs is refurbishing a PA-18 Super Cub for us this year, which will be raffled off at the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering. That event is still scheduled. It's still in works and planning. We're moving ahead with that. We'll have to wait and see what pandemic type restrictions we may have by that point, but that's far enough in the future that we're all hopeful that we'll be able to have a normal event by next May. So stay tuned for more information about that here on the social media events, all of our social media outlets, through email and on our website and in the transponder, all those different ways that we reach out to you. So let me get to my list here this evening because I don't want to keep us much longer than we need to. We are in the middle of a comment period for the LRDR, EIS, R2206, all these different acronyms. Actually, the Long Range Discrimination Radar at Clear Air Force Station at the north end of Windy Pass. And you think, haven't we already done that? We have. This is a different section of that. It's a huge process, but we are in the middle of a new comment period that goes through December. Let me get that actual date for you. And December 21st is actually when things are going on. There's some opportunities for you to get online and see some documentation. As I'm looking here at my cheat sheet, my notes here on my laptop, if you go to Clear, like CLEAR, EIS, Echo India, Sierra, that's environmental impact statement. Cleareis.com, you can find all that information, really thick documentation of all the different aspects of that. We've already commented earlier in this process. I'm formulating our comments even now. I need people to look at that and tell me what you see, tell me what you think might be issues, help me formulate our response. I've got a lot of things already figured out for that. One of the things that you need to look at is what some of the proposed airspace is going to look like. We have fought long and hard with our industry partners. That includes AOPA, that includes Alaska Air Carriers, that includes Alaska Aviation Safety Foundation, and all those things are being able to go back and work with those folks with the Missile Defense Agency and be able to get this information revised, and they've been very, very receptive. So kudos go out to the Department of Air Force, to the FAA, to Missile Defense Agency. They've listened to what our concerns are. They've gone back and redesigned a few things. There is provisions to be able to fly along the Parks Highway and stay out of the restricted area, the proposed restricted area. There's a temporary flight restriction that will be going into place after the first of the year, most likely, during the testing phase of this. But the airspace is kind of complicated. And so there's a balance we need to strike, and I need to know if you think this is a balance or if you think we need to go back and do some different things. Multiple layers in this new restricted airspace, and I need you to look at that and give me some feedback as to whether or not you think it's too complicated. Some of the airspace is going to be active 24/7, 365. Some of the airspace will only be active during the times of testing, which is 3 times a week. That's Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. Or, and this is where it gets kind of tricky, or as necessary in response to a national security crisis. Basically, they need to keep the ability to turn the radar on to its full capabilities at a moment's notice, or maybe without even any notice, and be able to have the full capability of that radar. Where that becomes a problem is in some of this proposed airspace. Right now, there is no provision for warning us when that airspace can go hot in the event of a national security crisis. And when I say go hot, I literally mean radar energy makes things hot. It could potentially let the smoke out of your electronics if you're within this protected area when this event happens. It can damage electronics, not just your radios, but if there's control circuitry for different systems on the airplane, there is concern that that could be a problem. So that's why this restricted area is being expanded like it is. To their credit, to the FAA, Missile Defense, and Air Force, to their credit, they don't need all of it all the time, and that's why they've come back to us with this proposal. And we need to comment on it. We need to coordinate and work with them to find out what that balance is. Part of me thinks it may be a little too complicated for some folks that aren't very familiar with it. Another part of me, even though the rare statistically improbability of it going hot without warning, I don't know that I want to risk that. And so there's a lot of conversations. I've got a call scheduled with them here in the next week or so to talk more about this. But I need you to go look at some of these things for yourself, get back to me, and let me know what you think. Cleareis.com is the website, and lots of information available there. Normally, they would have a public open house where you can go face-to-face and sit down and talk with someone, subject matter experts on this, and ask your questions. But in the world that we live in now with the COVID, not going to happen. So they have a virtual open house. Pretty interesting the way they're doing that. All the data, all the information, all the handouts, all that stuff is there. You can actually file your comments there and get them tracked and registered, and so that they will be a part of that public record at the end of that. So again, please go check and see and look and let me know what your opinion is about some of the things that they're proposing there. Once again, that address is cleareis.com, and If you have any questions about how to interpret some of this stuff or what does it mean, get in touch with me. My email address is pretty easy to find on the Airmen's website, adam.white@alaskaairmen.org. So talking about some other things for us. Space-based ADS-B. So you know that from previous updates that the Alaska Airmen's and AOPA wrote a joint letter to the FAA asking for 23 more ground stations for ADS-B. The FAA came back and says, yes, we agree, we need more in Alaska. We're going to start with looking at maybe 11, which is a good start. Not going to be a complete network, but it's a good start. And so there's going to be some things happening next spring about where some of those are going to go. They've already got some very good potential candidates for those first 11. But space-based ADS-B is a totally different ballgame. Airmen, which has a payload on the Iridium satellites, is looking at the 1090 extended squitter format of ADS-B. Now, without getting too deep in the weeds, there's two formats. There's 978 and there's 1090. 978 is for the low altitude, US only users. 1090 is anything into the flight levels here in Alaska, or if in the lower 48 above 10,000 feet, or internationally, you're required to have the 1090 format. Space-based ADS-B is monitoring the 1090 signal. I was in a briefing earlier today where they talked about their capabilities and what that's looking like and the data they're getting from that. Pretty impressive. If you want to see some of that, the easiest way to do that is to go to flightaware.com. You've probably heard of that website, probably even used it yourself. Go to flightaware.com and look at their ADS-B tab, and you can turn on some different layers, and you can see that Airmen space-based surveillance data that they're getting off of the Iridium satellites. There's a current test program right now underway with the FAA and Airmen, mainly in the Caribbean and way out the Aleutians, to see if that may help the FAA with some of their surveillance gaps in some of these high altitude route structure. Here's the problem. It is surveillance only. There is no data coming back to the cockpit from space-based ADS-B. It is, again, surveillance only as those capabilities. So while it does have some benefits, some pretty impressive preliminary data about potentially helping with search and rescue, it is, again, strictly only going to help with surveillance. And for most of you, most of our membership, surveillance is not the reason why you're equipping with ADS-B. The reason why you're equipping with ADS-B is to get the in data, the FISB, the Flight Information Service, and the Traffic Information Service that comes back to us only from the ADS-B ground stations. So that's why the Alaska Airmen's Association and others are pushing so hard for the FAA to fully deploy a robust ground network station of ADS-B out, of ADS-B in, that would come back into the cockpit here in Alaska. But still some very interesting capabilities for the surveillance side, and where that will help us as general aviation, VFR users, low altitude, is the possibility of helping with search and rescue. But again, that is only if you are equipped with 1090 extended squitter. So if you're not sure, if you don't know what those things mean, if you want to know more information about it, again, reach out to me and I'll be glad to help you understand some of that. Something else that is some pretty exciting stuff is the weather cameras. I know a lot of us really appreciate the weather camera program. Yesterday, I made a decision to go flying based off of the weather cameras. We had a small break in the weather here in the central interior. Most of you know I'm based here in Nenana. I was talking to one of you actually yesterday as you were coming through the Nenana area, and we talked about these updates there on the radio briefly. But because of the weather camera, I was able to look and make sure that I could get through the mountains and be able to get down to the Anchorage area and down to the Kenai Peninsula yesterday in that narrow window. It had been snowing. Yesterday was great. Not all the surface reporting places were showing good weather, but the cameras were showing that a lot of that was just low-level ground clutter and scud and fog, but that it was clear above that. And so made the decision to go. And so the weather cameras helped me out a lot just yesterday. Some new capabilities are coming to the weather camera program. They're actually testing some 360-degree cameras that hopefully, if that testing period goes well, we'll be able to see some new updates to the cameras on their normal cycle of updating that hardware, to be able to have a 360-degree view that we can then zoom in to a particular point and see exactly what we want to look at instead of just the pre-positioned camera views, which may or may not help us. I know that a lot of you have commented to me that you wish you could just see another 10 degrees to the left, or, you know, we're looking this direction. Where I really need to see is over here, and there is no camera angle for that. This will solve that problem. So it's pretty exciting stuff that's happening there. It's in the testing phase right now, and it's going to continue to be tested for a while. Something else that's exciting that's happening is we may have the ability to get more weather data because of the weather camera locations. Walter Combs and his crew at the weather camera program is experimenting and trying out some new weather sensors that are not the full-blown gold standard of a METAR and an AWAS, but still will give us temperature and dew point. They're looking at ceiling and visibility sensors right now to maybe incorporate those. And so some places where we don't have weather and where we don't necessarily need weather to shoot an instrument approach, because there is no instrument approach, but it would still be really nice to have that weather data, this may be an opportunity for us to get it. So weather camera program's going through and testing that out right now. And again, I think there's 5 sites that they're looking at to start an initial test with that. Some of the commercial air carriers are working with them with the weather camera program to help validate that data. We're reaching out to Walter Combs and his team to see if we can't get some Part 91 users to have access to this preliminary test data to see how it will help us as Part 91 operators. So exciting stuff there for the weather camera program. So something else I want to talk about just briefly, and kind of keeping our finger on this one a little bit to try to keep the pulse of this situation. It's been going on for a couple of years now. But the Alaska Railroad and easements and right-of-ways is becoming a problem for a lot of people. And it's starting to impact aviation. Flying Crown, if you're familiar with that strip there in South Anchorage, they are most directly impacted by this right now because of easements and right-of-ways, and how that traditionally for an easement is not necessarily the same thing for a railroad easement. And so there's been some back and forth as to what that really means, what you can do with that area, what you can't do with it. Obviously, the railroad has a very strict interpretation of they are the only ones that should be accessing that. Landowners have a little bit of a different opinion, because if it's a utility easement, you can still use that area. You just have to keep it accessible by the folks who have that easement. So that's not the case with the railroad. There's a lot of things back and forth right now. There's been some things happen with transferring land, transferring ownership of the Alaska Railroad from the federal government to the state. Very complicated issue, to the point where now it's being battled in the courts here in the state. So if you want some more information about that, again, reach out to me and email me. I can fill you in a little bit on that. It is something that we're tracking right now as the association, and my understanding is that that court case is going to be hopefully some movement on that next week. A brief has been prepared and going to be filed early next week, is my understanding from a conversation I had today. So stay tuned. I'll let you know more about that and what you might be able to do as a member and what we can do to see about land access and other issues. Because again, it's impacting people with private strips that are along the railroad and their ability to use their property, and different opinions as to what an easement and right-of-way means between the railroad and landowners. So we'll see how that court case goes. Also want to mention that we're obviously in the middle of trying to determine elections in our nation and in our state. Today they just started counting some absentee ballots, and so we have a lot of races that are not determined yet, beyond just the presidential side of things. We've still got a Senate race and a House race that is being determined by these absentee ballots, and the outcome is not 100% certain at this point. A lot of state legislative seats are kind of uncertain until that count is done. So what does that mean for us as members of the Alaska Airmen? Well, I can tell you what it means for me as being government legislative affairs. I don't know who I'm going to be working with when it comes another week, 2 weeks, a month. Who knows when all this stuff will be over. Some of the staffers that I've reached out to that are working for the folks currently in these positions, there's some uncertainty whether or not they're still going to have a job. There's some uncertainty whether or not the person that they're working for that's in that seat is going to be representing us in that seat in the future. And so election cycles are always a big thing, and a lot of work to reestablish relationships, to be able to introduce ourselves as the Airmen's Association to a new person, a new elected official, and to their staff. And so we're going to have a lot of work ahead of us, because it seems like there's going to be a pretty high turnover in some of the state races, and we'll see what happens on the national level with that. So just to let you know, we're all aware of what's going on with the elections at this point in time, but the Alaska Airmen's Association is on it. I'm following that very closely. And when races are officially determined and we know who's going to be in office, I'll start reaching out to those folks if they hold on to their seat, and talk to those staffers and keep going, picking up where we left off. And if there's a new person in that seat, start working with them and their staff to introduce ourselves and help them understand aviation and the importance it is for us here in Alaska. So I'm going to pretty much wrap things up. I hit most of the high points on things on my list. Buy your raffle tickets. Don't forget to buy your raffle tickets. And don't forget to keep your membership current. And if you're not a member of the Alaska Airmen's Association, go to alaskaairmen.org and find out how you can become a member and add your voice to the over 2,000 people when it comes to aviation here in Alaska. So thank you for your attentiveness. Thank you for sticking with the update tonight. It's good to see some familiar faces coming up, and I'm not seeing many questions coming up, just people checking in and saying hello, just scrolling back through to make sure I didn't miss anything. You are, again, encouraged to go ahead and send me an email, adam.white@alaskaairmen.org, and I'll be glad to answer your questions there. And look for these updates to be posted on our YouTube channel here in the next day or so they can be archived there as well. So cleareis.com, again, is that address to be able to go look at that documentation and be able to let me know what you think. Tell me if that airspace is too complicated for you. Tell me if that makes sense to you. Give me your ideas so we can take that back. Again, major kudos to the Air Force, to the Missile Defense Agency, and to the FAA for working with us and trying to come up with a solution. It's not been an easy task, and these folks are taking it serious when we come to them and say this is going to be a problem. So they're trying very, very hard, and we need to honor that and respect that and work through that process and let them know if that's good, or come back with some maybe some better solutions. So, all right, we're going to wrap things up. Again, thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you next time. Good night.